Hello, my name is Kamal Parsons, and I'm going to be doing a quick video summary of my STEM Pathways project entitled A More Perfect Package. So the problem that my project was trying to solve was the problem of plastic pollution. And through the specific lens of looking at single-use packaging. So this is a problem that we all know exists, and that we students at ISK have actually worked to curb. But before this project, I had only worked on the as opposed to working to stop the production of plastics altogether. I had been focused with Plastic Rafiki and other groups. Pictured here is a cleanup that we did on Mount Kenya with Plastic Rafiki during IC trips. I had been focused on the grave part of the product cycle. With this project, I intend to focus on the cradle in order to eliminate the problem completely. Although I recognize that single-use packaging is only a significant, but not comprehensive part of the plastic problem. Okay, so first we had to identify criteria and constraints, and then brainstorm possible solutions. I did both of these steps more or less at once, in part just because I had previously spent so much time thinking about those criteria and constraints. So when we're talking about anything that's trying to be environmentally friendly, every step of that product's life cycle, which we can analyze using a life cycle analysis, needs to be thought out. So the best kind of solution generally is to stop producing anything at all. So that's the total zero waste solution, but that puts a really big burden on the user that usually doesn't work. This is very much linked to the reusable replacement, which is a systems-based issue, which again is very difficult to overhaul the systems, especially if you're not in charge of more than one step of the system. For example, a supermarket could require that people bring their own reusable bags, and many Kenyan supermarkets do, but it's necessary that they require that for this to be done, because otherwise, again, there's too much burden on the user. Then the last idea was to dematerialize for less waste. So any thinner package, that means less energy goes into making it. It means that there's less plastic at the end. Any kind of downsizing is good for the dematerialization aspect. And also just using materials that take up less resources to produce. So like plant-based plastics as opposed to oil-based plastics. So what I ended up going with was a compostable replacement for the existing products on the market. That has some downsides, namely lots of energy goes into making every one of the products compared to like a single energy investment. And if the product isn't properly composted at the end of its life cycle, it still ends up in a landfill. It still produces methane as it decomposes. But under normal circumstances, my more perfect package would, in theory, be more environmentally friendly and not result in the amount of waste that a normal single-use package would, single-use plastic package. So within that, I was thinking about different possibilities, and I did a lot of kind of cursory research about what other people were doing with packaging. And I found a lot of ideas, but my favorites and the kind of the broader categories of what other people have done are written down here. Kombucha. So the SCOBY film that grows over kombucha. Kombucha is something that I had worked with before to drink, not to play with. But now with this project, I did explore the ways in which to use it as a material. So then recycled paper, because it's an existing waste product of existing systems, and also because it's possible to integrate different things into that paper. Again, I had worked a little bit with this before in IB Art. Mostly I'd just seen like one demonstration that Mr. Nicholas did about it, but that gave me the idea of integrating different seeds into the paper to make it a tool for reforestry and for returning biodiversity to different locations. Then my other ideas were to use some sort of plant-based material, like I'd previously seen banana leaves, and those are pretty common in Kenya. And lastly, some kind of cloth that was within the reusable replacement section. So that was in brainstorming possible solutions and identifying criteria and constraints. So now selecting a design, we already talked about that, building a model or prototype. So I made several different scobies using different kombucha recipes, and I also tested how quickly I could grow SCOBY by affecting different variables, and how thin I could get it while it was still useful by affecting different variables. And while doing that, I learned different things about the process and about the importance of different steps of the process, just how SCOBY's material functions, but also that can probably be broadened to other fungi and microorganisms and their reactions to the environment. So their reactions to air, to non-sterile materials, to reactive materials like metals, as you can see in these first three pictures. But then I also tested these low fidelity prototypes with just origami to see how I should put together this material in order to make a functional package. And then I tested those models. You can see here how I tested the different, what are these? Low fidelity prototypes. And then below a higher fidelity prototype, once I had kind of experimented with what the boys could do. That's not the word I'm looking for. Whatever, I'm tired. And then in order to share my solutions, I explored different ways that designers have of sharing solutions. So different kinds of presentation drawings, pictured here. And then this one's more like an advertisement. This is more technical for maybe manufacturer or maybe as a presentation for a client. And then down here is a Young's modulus, which is a materials. It's a way designers communicate the material properties of certain objects, certain certain materials, obviously. But I did one myself, and my experimental setup for that is in my presentation. So my successes and my failures. I think there were parts of the testing that were really difficult for me, and that I learned a lot about along the way. Obviously, learning from my mistakes was a really important part of this process. So I would say one of my major achievements was just adaptability. And when I identified follow-up tests at first, I found it very difficult to actually complete those, but later I started to get better at that and to do them more effectively and do a better write-up. So as I continued working on this project, my design journal improved a lot. What would I have done differently? Well, there were certain parts, especially early on, where I think I didn't document what I was doing very well. and that made things more difficult later on, especially now because of coronavirus. I can't go back and do the tests that I didn't document well. Um, so I think there's a lot of information that I like, a lot of research I did that is basically lost now. Um, but that was definitely a learning experience for me. What did I learn about myself in the process? Well, I learned that my workflow is very um, my brain really likes having that kind of freedom to do different things. I've included this image because although it doesn't link directly to this Pathways project, it does tangentially link to this Pathways project, and in fact probably wouldn't have been possible without Pathways, because, well, in part just because I spent more time in the lab while working on my Pathways project, and a lot of what I had to do was just wait, um, for water to boil and for things to cool down so that I wouldn't kill my SCOBY. Um, and while I was there, I did a lot of designing, but also because I was able to apply concepts from my my DT class, but also from my Pathways project to just other projects that I was working on. So things with plastic graffiti and stuff, like these planters that you can see here.